It's the new version of an old problem, a growing threat of a government shutdown.
I've no illusions. I've been doing this for 10 terms, and I've seen this movie before.
We talked to two Texas congressmen on opposite sides of the fight to keep the government running, why it's happening again, and what comes next. Abortion, immigration, energy. Donald Trump and Kamala Harris lay out their contrasting ideas on the debate stage, how their positions could have a distinct impact on Texas. The need is great, but Texas falls short in meeting the need for mental health care.
The ability for somebody to have access to mental health care is often the difference with life and death.
We look at who's sounding the alarm and what's happening now to recruit the psychologists of the future.
Produced from the Capitol in Austin and airing statewide, this is the award-winning State of Texas.
Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Ryan Chandler, in for Josh Hinkle. Well, here we go again. Lawmakers in Washington need to reach an agreement on a stopgap spending bill to avoid a government shutdown. The bill is also known as a continuing resolution, or a CR. The deadline is 2 weeks away and still there's no sign of a deal. Former President Donald Trump is pushing House Republicans to attach the spending bill to a measure called the SAVE Act. That's a bill requiring proof of citizenship to register to vote. Opponents say that could make it more difficult for people like college students to register. House lawmakers were supposed to vote Wednesday on legislation pairing the spending bill with the SAVE Act, but Speaker Mike Johnson pulled the vote as it became clear the plan did not have the votes to pass. Our team in Washington spoke with Texas Congressman Michael McCall about what's at stake and the path forward.
I voted for the SAVE Act. It basically says, like, under federal law, you have to be a legal citizen to vote, and it tries to enforce that at the state level. There's a lot of loss of faith in our elections, and something like this, I think, would give people more confidence. Having said that, I've no illusions. I've been doing this for 10 terms, and I've seen this movie before. And so I think the opening salvo will be the SAVE Act and the CR. I don't think that will survive the Senate. And then we're going to go back to, do we shut down the government or not? And I've never been a fan of that because that doesn't accomplish really anything. And at the end of the day, it hurts our military more than anything. And so does a CR, by the way, which I don't like. It will probably be a short-term CR extension is my guess.
Through the end of the year? Or
well, that's going to be the big debate. Is it going to be the end of the year, or is it going to go into next year with the hope that maybe we'll have a different administration?
You don't know which one?
I don't have a crystal ball. That's how I see it progressing.
That's one view of the path forward, but we want to go a little deeper with someone on the other side of the aisle. Texas Congressman Lloyd Doggett serves on both the House Ways and Means Committee and the Budget Committee, so some very interesting perspective. Thank you so much for joining us.
So good to be with you.
You know, we have seen these fights over budgets and shutdowns for decades. You've been in the House for 3 decades. Why does this keep happening?
Well, some feel it's to their advantage to threaten to shut down everything in order to get their way. And we've had one after another, and these shutdowns have been led by Republicans every time that they've occurred. This particular one is really ridiculous. Here we are without the appropriations bills passed, and the claim is that if we will just add this provision about citizenship, that everything will go along okay. Let me explain exactly what this SAVE Act does. It does not apply just to immigrants. It applies to all of us. If you don't have your birth certificate, if you don't have a passport, it's not good enough to use the real ID that gets you through airport security. You won't be able to vote. That's what they're insisting on weeks before the election is supposed to begin. That will cause chaos, and maybe that's what the objective is. And keep in mind that the United States House of Representatives is really Donald Trump's house. Nothing happens there without his blessing or approval. He is the one pushing this because he pushes the myth, and it is a myth, that Democrats are busing people illegally to come vote and prevent his election. It's against federal law and has long been for illegals to vote here, and it's not happening. Ken Paxton has searched all over the state, and he hasn't been able to find an example of people improperly entering the country and voting.
Right, and we should note that non-citizen voting is already illegal and vanishingly
Absolutely.
rare. But that point kind of goes both ways. If it's already illegal and meant to combat a problem that is almost non-existent, is it worth shutting down the government in order to stop the SAVE Act?
Well, if the SAVE Act were adopted today, it would disrupt this election. Think about the millions of people in Texas and around the country, it applies everywhere, that if you don't have your birth certificate handy, if you don't have a passport, how do you show that you are a citizen of this country? It's not good enough to give them a driver's license anymore or a normal form of identification. So what we will have is disrupted voting for no good purpose other than to satisfy Donald Trump's demand.
Where's the room for compromise here?
There is no room for compromise on the SAVE Act because we cannot afford any more chaos in our elections than we may have anyway. As far as keeping the government open, I agree completely with Congressman McCall that what we need is a short-term continuing resolution that simply keeps the government operating. And I also agree with him that even having a continuing resolution is an indication of the failure of this Republican Congress.
You heard Congressman McCall describe this stage of negotiations as just the opening offer. But do you think that the government should or will shut down if Republicans do not back off from insisting on the SAVE Act?
I'm hopeful that they will not. I think Donald Trump wants a government shutdown and has said as much if he can't get his way. I hope that eventually what will happen is there is another body, the United States Senate, that they will go on, and they have bipartisan support there, approve a continuing resolution and send it to the House, and that the Speaker will let us vote, because there will be a strong bipartisan majority for what we call a clean continuing resolution. The disadvantage of a continuing resolution is it's putting in place last year's funding without any adjustments for needs at the Defense Department or elsewhere. And our federal officials in national security, as Mike mentioned, and elsewhere, don't have any certainty of how they're going to handle the rest of the year. Hopefully, a short-term, clean, continuing resolution will get this job done before Christmas.
Congressman Doggett, so many things that I want to keep asking you about in this very busy time, but I'm sure we'll get another chance before the election to break all this down. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for this opportunity. Great to see you.
From abortion to immigration and policies for oil, gas, and renewable energy, we dig into the debate and what Harris and Trump had to say about issues with a distinct impact on Texans.
Ultimately, what I think we all want is for our crime victim survivors to be taken care of.
Our ongoing investigation into the state's Crime Victims Compensation Fund gets new attention at the Capitol. The action from lawmakers to fix the problem we exposed. Texas falling short when it comes to meeting the need for mental health care. We look at the work now underway in the state to recruit the psychologists of the future. A major driver of our state's economy landed in the spotlight during Tuesday's presidential debate. We're talking, of course, about energy policy. Texas is home to more than 1 in 10 of the nation's energy workers. Both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris advocated for diverse energy sources, in addition to expanding production of fossil fuels. Business leaders I spoke with believe that's good news for the Texas economy and for jobs. When it comes to power, Texas wants it all.
We need more solar, we need more batteries, we need more natural gas, we need geothermal. It's all the above and below.
At Tuesday's debate, the candidates seem to agree.
I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. By the way, I'm a big fan of solar.
I will not ban fracking. We have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil.
Texas leads the nation in both oil and gas and renewables. In fact, when you add up Texan wind, solar, and nuclear, it's almost equal to our natural gas production. While both candidates are leaning into diverse power sources, Texas leaders have a clear endorsement.
There's no comparison. The Trump administration was far better in terms of Texas energy.
The Texas Association of Business points to the Biden administration's ban on liquid natural gas exports. But they also hope that Trump would continue Biden's support for clean energy.
We want to make sure that the promotion that this current administration has on clean energy technologies and also things like hydrogen development and carbon sequestration is continued. We want to have our cake and eat it too.
Investors are pouring money into all forms of Texas energy with a bias for profit, not politics. They say the market, not politicians, should influence energy decisions.
The market allows us, through signals that we call prices, to let us know what it wants.
With the presidential debate still fresh on the minds of voters, we're looking at what the two candidates said about some of the top issues for Texans. Topics like abortion, border security, and energy costs. KXAN's Tom Miller talked with The Hill's Julia Mueller about where Harris and Trump stand.
Let's start with abortion access, which is severely restricted in Texas. Both candidates weighing in on that. What did they say?
Trump, who has said in the past that he wouldn't sign a national abortion ban if he got a second term, sort of dodged questions about whether or not he'd veto such a ban if it came to his desk. Trump in the past has bragged about the overturning of Roe versus Wade 2 years ago, which ended federal protections for the procedure, and he's touted the Supreme Court justices that he appointed to the bench. Moderators during the debate tried to press Trump on this veto question, particularly because his running mate, J.D. Vance, said not too long ago that Trump would veto a ban if it came forward during a potential second term. And Trump said repeatedly that he wouldn't have to, sort of sidestepping the question.
Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions, very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government.
Vice President Harris, for her part, said that she would proudly sign protections, restoring Roe versus Wade protections, federal protections for abortion, if it came to her desk. She stressed the dire circumstances that some women have been left in after Roe versus Wade, Roe's fall 2 years ago, and said that it's important for her to expand protections for the procedure.
In over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime of violation to their body does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body.
Now, on the topic of immigration, Trump criticized the Biden administration for the number of migrants who've come into the country, but then he quickly waded into this claim that migrants are eating pets and was fact-checked almost immediately by the moderators. What happened there?
Trump embraced some conspiracy theories about migrant communities during the debate, and moderators again fact-checked him as they tried to steer the conversation. Those claims come as Trump and Republicans broadly have really worked to hammer the Biden administration and Vice President Harris over immigration. That was something that they really hammered Biden on when he was in the race, and since Harris has launched her fast-track bid, they've really attempted to paint her as the, quote, border czar and effectively blame her in part for problems at the southern border.
Final question here. Do you get the impression that either candidate did enough to move the numbers in Texas, where some of these issues are hot topics? And what do the latest polls in Texas show?
Harris and Trump took the debate stage at a time when the polls are really showing them nationally neck and neck. The race is very close, even as Harris has been able to make up some of the gaps we saw when President Biden was in the race. I was looking at an August poll from the University of Texas and the Texas Politics Project that showed Trump up just a few points over Harris in Texas, with 49% to Harris's 44%, which is, notably close in a race like this. It seemed at times that he was rattled by his sparring with her, that she was able to get under his skin at different points. And so this debate does have the potential to impact the polling numbers just in a race that is so tight. Even the smallest, couple points here and there can make the difference.
Julia Mueller with The Hill, we appreciate you taking the time.
The demand is dire, but it can be difficult for Texans to find mental health care.
It's painful to see many people not have access to care.
Why some experts are sounding the alarm and searching for ways to get more resources to meet the growing need. And later, the push to get crime victims the money they're owed by the state of Texas. What lawmakers are doing to help improve the system. Work is underway in Texas to recruit the psychologists of the future. It comes as experts take a hard look at where the state is falling short when it comes to mental health care. Suicide rates have been on the rise in Texas for more than 2 decades, and mental health battles claim the lives of more than 4,000 Texans every year. And still, we rank last in access to care. I want you to take a look at this map that underscores the dire need across the state. The counties in orange here are the only ones that do not have a shortage of mental health professionals. It's just 6 out of the 254 counties in Texas. But there is progress. I had a chance to speak to some of the experts who are finding innovative ways to get help to these communities. For the Texans at the forefront of the fight for mental health, it's personal.
I have seen firsthand how much suffering is experienced by people who don't have access to mental health services.
In Texas, that's a lot of people. Of our 254 counties, Dr. Berg says 246 are considered underserved in mental health care needs. 137 have not a single psychologist. 32 have just one. That's worse than every state in the country.
Texas is a proud state, and we should not rank 50th in anything.
At Thursday's hearing, the board in charge of licensing psychologists described more bureaucratic barriers that they fear will make matters worse.
I don't think we've ever seen such a threat for our ability to license psychologists in this state.
Bilamowicz says the nation's only licensing exam company is now requiring a second test. A tremendous additional cost, he says, and one that will lead to fewer psychologists, not more.
We don't need to be making the barriers higher and harder into this profession for people. The ability for somebody to have access to mental health care is often the difference with life and death.
Last year, the legislature dedicated $3.4 billion to expand capacity at state mental health facilities. Dr. Berg says that's a good start.
And it's almost artificial to talk about mental health when we are really talking about improving the health of our entire community across the state.
In April, Governor Abbott announced $34 million will go toward building a new behavioral health campus in Uvalde. That facility will have a dedicated wing for younger patients, including a crisis unit for children and adolescents. It's scheduled to open next summer. Lawmakers pushing for transparency and accuracy. The new work at the Capitol to help victims get money the state owes them as they recover from violent crime.
Ultimately, what I think we all want is for our crime victim survivors to be taken care of.
Our ongoing investigation into the State Crime Victims Compensation Fund is getting new attention at the Capitol. Investigator Matt Grant takes a closer look at how lawmakers are working to fix a problem we first exposed.
Nearly 2 years after KXAN first began investigating and exposing problems with the state's fund meant to help victims of violent crimes, lawmakers are now taking action. The House Appropriations Committee met to discuss an interim charge to look into a backlog of claims at the Attorney General's office after we exposed skewed data that makes it appear victims were being paid faster than they actually were. Lawmakers signaled they will approve changes to make payment data more transparent and accurate. The problem stemming from data that averaged payments made directly to victims, which can take months, with payments made directly to hospitals for forensic exams that can take just days.
And it puts both of those together. It skews it a bit, does it not?
Yes, it does. And that makes it really hard for me to do what I'm there to do, which is look for opportunities for improvement.
So if you put all those together, the rapid payments skew it and makes it look like the payments are being made more timely. So had that not been raised by our constituents, had that not been reported on, we may not be talking about it now.
The changes are expected to be approved by the legislature and, if so, would go into effect next September. Attorney General Ken Paxton's office, which hasn't responded to our request for comment in months, told lawmakers that they feel these changes are necessary. At the Capitol, Matt Grant, State of Texas.
And that's the State of Texas this week. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you back here next week. I'm Ryan Chandler.